I wanted to go over the 2022, and I'm going to run through a bunch of things pretty quickly and so forth. So I'm really glad a bunch of people sort of showed up here. I was kind of surprised actually, since this thing came together just really quickly and so forth. This is not going to be a real financially oriented kind of call or anything. There will be some finance discussion definitely in it, but primarily I'm just going to kind of revisit the year, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about next year and what it's going to bring and so forth. It has been a very challenging year across every kind of metric you can look at, and it's really surprising because if you take us from last December, um, things were going so well for us, and in hindsight now I can see exactly what happened, and I hate myself for not recognizing it while it was happening. And what I'll say there, just so that you sort of understand it, and I'm not expecting everybody will get the context here unless you've been around since say like 2017. But in 2017, I was a miner, and I started kind of getting into this stuff, and we watched this whole run up of Bitcoin into the end of 2017, and then what happened after that was there was a peak of Bitcoin, and then after that there was this thing that came to be known as alt season, and altcoins all had their big runs sort of following the Bitcoin run. And everybody was kind of waiting for that to happen in the next go round, and it never seemed to happen. Instead, all this goofy stuff happened that we were not really ready for, or at least I wasn't ready for. And because I wasn't really focused on it anymore, I didn't really even dive in and sort of understand it. So NFTs, all of the things around DeFi, the farming, all of the weird stuff, the loans, I didn't have any knowledge of what was going on there with the loans, which is a good thing, by the way, because I probably would have went out and taken a bunch against our company had I really known how that was all working. And of course, we'd be in a really pretty challenging space right now if that was the case. But um, all that stuff I just didn't really follow because I was more old school, utility coin guy. And then what happened in 2021 was, we had this sort of second peak with Bitcoin going back up and hitting an even higher high. So it was confusing. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me what was going on. It dropped back down towards the end of December, but then it looked like it was going to go ahead and continue to make another run. And it hadn't fulfilled what was called, super cycle by a few people. So it was really not clear what was going on. It was really difficult to sort of understand it. And then what happened with us, of course, was we went from 1,400 people in the Discord to over 11,500, and all of our network broke. Everything that we were doing was under stress and load. We had all kinds of but then there was a lot of examiners being sold. It was just a crazy, wild sort of experience. And I really wasn't paying that much attention to the charts to really understand what was happening. Because had I understood what was happening, we'd be in a much different place today than we are right now. I'm not saying it would be better necessarily. It would be better from a financial security standpoint for sure, but I'm not sure we're not in exactly the place that we're supposed to be. And I'll explain that a little bit. So, you know, as we've talked a lot about, the idea of um, limiting the network growth back last December. If you recall, towards the end of December, we had like this, demand for thousands of Examiner sales. I mean, literally everybody piled on because of those videos. We could have sold 3, 4, 5,000 units had I decided I wanted to, be in that mode where 8 months later we were still looking at people, waiting to be delivered gear. But I'm just not built that way, right? And so ultimately I said, you know what, I'm going to call it at 1,000 units, and we'll just let the chips fall where they may, and we'll come back and we'll pick it up. And that built a gigantic wait list of people that wanted miners. And then, once we finally started opening up the wait list, that's when the market started doing the thing that I didn't see. And had I seen it, I might have done some things differently. I might have taken more of those miner sales. I might have actually, been willing to push that envelope a little further, because had I recognized what had happened to us at the end of December, not as something specific to our project, that we were getting all this movement, not because of these videos, not because of the stuff that was going on with our development, not that we were about ready to ship a product, but the fact that the market was just going through alt season. Had I seen that, I probably would have made significantly different decisions than I made. And I'm not sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, by the way. I just don't know. I haven't had enough time to really think it through. But what I'll tell you happened is this, and it'll kind of go to some of the year end sort of stuff that we went through. So what we ended up with, okay, is we ended up with a very robust network. But it could have been a lot more, obviously. But the network we ended up with is very robust, and we're currently sitting on 2,822, give or take, fully licensed, in the game providers. We had reached just under 4,000 at one point when all of the Pi people were here, when all of the people were just, willing to throw a bunch of extra storage at the project, but not really get licensed up or any of that sort of stuff. But we lost about 1,000 to 1,100 of those folks pretty quickly once they realized, oh, we're going to have to do this. And also, what happened then when alt season concluded, right, was the market started to fall apart. And when the market started to fall apart, it also didn't happen in the way previous markets fall apart. What happened when the market fell apart was it really happened quickly. It sort of just came out of nowhere. And then it didn't happen in the same way that it happened in any of the previous ones where it paused. There would be like 2 or 3 weeks of down and then a couple of weeks of recovery and then, continued whatever. It was just a sustained 12-week period of down. And that was all of the Voyager, Celsius, all of those guys, the Terra Luna blow up, all of the stuff that just one thing just kept leading to another, kept leading to another. And ultimately, I'd never seen anything like that. And I was totally not ready for it. Right. I didn't know really that it was coming, and I didn't have any preparation for it, so to speak, because it just was completely out of, everything that I was about. Well, part of what it did for us, it didn't really, hurt us from, our fundamentals or anything that we were doing with the project. Our thing has never really been based on, what crypto is doing, so to speak. A little bit, but not that much. But the damage was so significant that actually it did start to impact us pretty heavily. And I'll kind of cover that in a couple of seconds on how. But in that process, what we did end up with is we ended up going from 1,400 to a little over 11,000 people in the Discord. Now, they don't all talk here, but they didn't all leave either, right? So whether they have us on mute or whether they don't get the notifications, these people do stop in from time to time and take a look at the thing. It's like every other Discord that has a lot of people in it. What ends up happening is you have a percentage that ends up staying active. But the cool thing is that when we go out and talk to exchanges or people like that or investors, telling them we have an 11,000, person Discord puts us up there as legit. We were not legit before at 1,400. We were just a group of Cub Scouts that all kind of banded together. Now we're actually in a real place. The data stored on the network is 1,901 terabytes, according to the last KBI I looked at earlier this morning. And I think most people will sort of understand that most of that is what we call testing data. Some of it is just bullshit that we've just uploaded directly, but most of it over the last period of this year has been in the service of actually doing specific testing and actually seeing how various providers can accept data or not accept data. In that process, what happened was over the year, we overtook Storage as the second largest pure storage network in crypto. That was a pretty important thing. Um, Nobody really sees it yet except you guys. I mean, the people here in the community and who are on the network. We've mentioned it to the rest of the world, but they're not really paying attention to us yet at this point. But the fact is, we did pass that network, and that network then puts us as the next one that's in our sights as Filecoin. Now, Filecoin's a long ways away as far as capacity and size, but it's a pretty big statement to say that we showed up and passed them by with a solid network that works. We overtook Saya recently as the third largest in the amount of stored data. And again, the stored data is Filecoin and Storage, and then us. We'll overtake Storage probably sometime in the first couple of quarters of this coming year. And that, again, will be another pretty big milestone. But I think that one will probably be one that's a little harder to ignore. And I think going forward, all of those metrics are going to be a little harder to ignore. Um, on the utility coin that's driving that network, we're also in a very interesting place because we're in year 5 now of the emission on our blockchain. And so right now, if you're paying any attention to the consensus channel, you're recognizing that there's a lot of sturm and drang about what's going on with who can mine our coin and how it's impacted us. And it's really clear. I won't revisit the last 4 years because there's no reason to, but it's really clear to me that our coin has really sort of been limited a little bit by some choices or some opportunities that were presented to us in the early days, and kind of how the economics have played out to that and how we've kind of ignored that whole thing over the last year, maybe year and a half to 2 years. What happened was is we sort of just said, well, we got a good, decent hash rate. Let's just go ahead and keep moving, doing everything about storage network and provider development and software development. But what ended up happening was some people saw an opportunity really to take advantage of what was really an interesting kind of a wrinkle, right? There was these machines that essentially were high efficiency all the way back in 2018. And on this algorithm, they've continued to maintain high efficiency because there's never been really any reason for anybody to build a higher efficiency unit in the hopes of being profitable. And the reason is because if you look at Saya and their chart, their USD chart, you'll see that they had a couple of very large pumps back in 2018. And then it's just been a downward motion ever since. And it's never really gone very high since then. So for an ASIC manufacturer to step up and actually build for Blake 2B, it would have to be us in combination with them, or they would have to see real value in what Saya is doing, or somebody else would have to come along and pick up Blake 2B. Well, Goldshell came along and did see that idea. So they did release this thing. That is a high efficiency Saya miner. And they didn't even care about us, right? Even though we told them we existed, they didn't care. They just built up for Saya and not really sure why. But at the end of the day, they put this high efficiency miner out there. And that really started me to get back interested in what was going on with consensus beyond just understanding that at some point we're going to switch over to a different consensus model and move forward. The current situation is in year 4, a very large percentage of the emission has been mined that's ever going to be produced. We're at 52.2 million coins, and that means that on average, we've mined about 13 million per year, right? It doesn't work that way. It actually was like 20 some million in the first year, and then it dropped every year after that. But essentially, a fairly hefty amount of coins mined per year. But if you look at the future, the next year, only 3 million coins are going to be produced or mined on our blockchain before we end up with essentially a flatline inflation. I think it ends up being something like 2% out into the future. And really, it ends up hitting at about 55 million coins, and it just stays there for a long time, or it stays in a very, very slow motion growth. And what's interesting is that our coin price has not followed that, right? Typically, what would happen in this scenario is as the coins got in greater and greater scarcity type scenario, the price would tend to follow along and the hash rate would tend to follow along with the price. And that never happened for us. It just never happened. We did get a little bit of price discovery in alt season last year, but the mining situation has been such that essentially these miners that we took from the other blockchain, right? That they shed off, that were already all paid for and all owned by a small cabal of miners, essentially has had their sway with our project ever since they've been here. And they are the ones responsible. Now, it's funny because today it's really good because one of these individuals who disagrees with me on this has posted in the troll box this morning on the South Exchange about how, I'm always blaming somebody else for our problems and not taking blame. Well, anybody who knows me knows I I fucking wake up in the morning and blame myself for something, right? It's like I'm willing to accept as much responsibility about all of this stuff as needed, but at the end of the day, the miners own the price. They own the coin price. And if they don't agree with that, they just don't understand how crypto works. And the fact that this small cabal of people who have managed to aggregate a bunch of these units and now are really pissed off because we're about to take that away from them, and not immediately, but in the span of time. Um, it's because we recognized, look, there's just been this really weird anomaly created, and they've been allowed to essentially just milk and milk and milk and milk this project for everything it's worth, and never let the price go to where it's supposed to go. To be frank about it, we should have kicked them off the chain a year ago, but it just wasn't really in our radar, and it really wasn't the thing to do. And it really would lead to a lot of challenging issues and concerns. We talked about moving to proof of stake a year ago, but at the end of the day, proof of stake really wasn't quite ready. And it's still not quite ready. It's still probably about another, I think, 18 months to 24 months away. But then I think in 18 to 24, I think we're going to have a very easy transition over to something like Ethereum, and it probably is going to be Ethereum, but it could be one of the other, layer ones that are out there. But the whole notion here is because they didn't allow the price to go up on the coin, we have this really weird situation where the coin is super freaking scarce. I know it doesn't look that way, but the coin is actually really scarce right now. In that there's only going to be 3 million mined out of 55 million over the next 12 months. That's scarcity. That is just raw scarcity. And they loved it because essentially they had ownership of all of those coins. Yeah, there are few people in this channel own one or two miners, and we're pulling off a few. But at the end of the day, it was these people with these bigger farms that essentially just controlled it. They could just spin up more S11s as needed, or take them down, or whatever. And, it just kind of is what it is. Well, with the price down to where it is, it's really caused a challenge in terms of how the year has progressed. So back to alt season and the coin collapsing under all of those guys and blah blah blah, and us having withheld and only sold 1,000 miners. And then we showed up about March, and we were shipping all these Exa miners, and the supply chain started to open up a little bit. I was able to start finding components and getting things out there. And the interesting thing about back in that time frame is, I'd been through a lot of that with supply chains before. I've been building computers forever. So I kind of could see how it was going to loosen up. So I began starting to open up some of the wait lists, and we did deliver, some additional sales and so forth. And people, but it was really clear to me almost immediately that the list was no longer as rich as it once was, that people were starting to get fearful about what was happening in the market. And a lot of people were attributing what was going on outside, to what was going on inside. And I'm not going to say that, that we didn't, miss some of the deadlines that we had set for ourselves. J18 and then A23, definitely were deadlines, and we did not hit those the way that we wanted to hit them. But that isn't the reason that the real enthusiasm started to dissipate. The reason is the market in general was melting down all the way around, and it was melting down hard and in ways that were just really, really challenging. And so what ended up happening is we had 15,000 names on a wait list, and they kind of just went poof, right? We didn't have but a couple hundred sales that turned up out of that for the rest of the summer. So that was a real challenge. Now, here's what happened. Starting in about February. I could say late January, but it was really in February where it happened. I started looking at it and I again, I didn't see it correctly. And I just own this, by the way, but I didn't see the chart correctly as to what it was actually doing, because at that point it was consolidating and it looked to me like it was getting supercharged up for the next run up. Might take a month or two or a couple months or 3 months, 5 months, whatever. But in no way did I think that Terra Luna was going to blow up and then turn into a 14-week slaughter fest. So at that point, I said, well, look, our investors and stakeholders and people that bought the coin and the new people that are standing up providers and everything, they're going to have an interest in, with the supply getting thin, they're going to start buying the coin. And I think, a dollar looks to me to be a place where we're probably going to, come down to and stop. And that'll be a good consolidation place. And ultimately, then we can take the next move up to where we really should be, because everybody knows that we should be somewhere around $3 to $10 so that we would be comped to our peers, right? We would be like Storage or Sia or whoever. That's where we're supposed to be. I don't care whether you believe that or buy that or not. That's where we should be on a valuation base. We're not, and it's because of those S11 guys. They want to blame me. I'm blaming them. I'm right. They're wrong. It is what it is. The deal there, though, is I started buying the coin, right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. As a corporation, our job is to buy up SCP to put into contracts. Those contracts then get fulfilled by you folks, the storage providers, and then we pay you for that. And we pay you on top of it with incentives for maintaining great uptime and doing all the other stuff that you're supposed to be doing. So I started making some pretty good buys down there to hold the line at a dollar. For one, I wanted to keep the value up for everybody. And at the same time, we knew we needed to go ahead and continue to accumulate coins. And I felt like the coin was on sale at a dollar, right? I thought it was like, cheap. So I'm saying, let's go ahead and let's pick up quite a bit of coins. So a lot of the money that we raked in, right, on that 1,000 unit sale, that December wave, turned around and ended up going right back out to buying up coins on the open market. We spent $998,000 and 204 in order to buy up SCP between February and the beginning of May. Okay. By the time it got to mid to late April and May, our buys had slowed down significantly because it was clear that, probably the thesis was wrong. We made most of our buys in February and March. So our ultimate basis against the 1.32 million coins that we purchased, probably around 75 cents, right? Let me look. Coin price is like 11 and a half cents right now. So pretty big mistake, pretty colossal mistake. And I own 100% of it. I mean, I didn't cause it, but I misread it. Had I understood where we were from a market perspective, I would have just not bought any coins. Obviously, I would have just held all that money, and then I'd have $1 million right now that I could use to buy whatever. Of course, I'd probably just go out and buy myself about 10 Dodge Rams, but it is what it is. In truth, had I been able to do that, we would have bought coins in the late summer, fall, and we would have been able to keep the price up somewhere around 25 to 50 cents, I think, and not let it go to where it's gone. But again, it's the miners that are continuing to sell it, right? It's not people that are trying to escape the project because there's no liquidity. There just isn't enough liquidity for people to escape the project if they don't believe at this point. So it continues to be those S11 guys. And by the way, an S11 right now, if it has like China or industrial Canada or some of these other really good electric rates that are available, 5.5 cents, and we do know people that have that kind of rate, it's profitable. They're actually making money selling the coin at 11 cents. So that's why we are where we are. Well, it's now a real problem for us, right? And it's going to become a problem for the project going forward in a not insignificant way. But I think we've devised a strategy which is going to make it work out for everybody. And ultimately, I think in the end, we'll look back in hindsight and it will be one of those great colossal opportunities And the people that understand this will take advantage, and the people that don't understand it are leaving, right? And there are a few people, prominent people in some cases, that have decided to check out of the project and take off now. We call that selling at the bottom, right? And that is a hallmark in crypto that I can identify with. I've seen it. I've actually participated in it myself. So, back in the day in 2018 when things fell apart and I'd never been through anything like that, I made some really bad sales. I got rid of things that I should have held on to. I sold Ethereum at $80, right? I mean, it's that, and that's where we are right now. And so there are some people that are engaged in that kind of thing. But what it's going to ultimately do is it's going to put us into a situation where we are going to spend the entirety of the treasury that's available to us on storage providers. Now, you guys are all going, yay, us, because you are going to make out really strong right now on this, coin distribution over the next 6 to 12 months because of the coin price being where it is. You're going to be getting rebates, you're going to be getting incentives, you're going to be getting everything at a much higher rate. And that's a good thing for you guys because it's the early bird gets the worm kind of thing. But at the end of the day, what is also a problem there is that it's going to put a lot of coins on the street. It's going to put a lot of coins in wallets that maybe we're not expecting to get that many coins, and maybe we're not expecting to, earn quite that quick. And so when things do turn and the markets start to go upwards, the sell pressure is going to be higher because some of you are going to de-risk, some of you are going to, decide to go ahead and exit a little bit to kind of clean up from this year that we just went through. Maybe you did get involved in some of these other things. Maybe some of your NFTs haven't turned out or whatever. So the sell pressure is going to be significant. And this is going to create a bigger wall for us going forward. And it's going to be harder for us to reach that price discovery that we want to reach. But I don't think it's going to turn into being that big of an issue for us. And I'll kind of explain why as I get through some more of these numbers from the year that was. So in the year that was, as we're talking about the mining and how that mining all worked out, there was an interesting little wrinkle that kind of highlighted what I think is the reality of the S11 hash rate, is that there are a group of North American miners who essentially own the hash rate. Well, they kind of do. They're like the big kids. They're the bullies who are the big kids when the real big kids are not around, right? When the real big kids show up, which happened in December, right? When the coin started going through its alt season thing, the real big kids showed up. Those are the China miners, right? Because our hash rate zoomed all the way up to an all-time high of 18.77 petahash per second. So the thing there is that our current hash rate is actually close to our all-time or this year's low, which was 2.61. So you can see, I mean, we zoomed up like 6x to an all-time crazy amount of hash rate. I mean, 20 petahash or close nearby, that's a lot. But we always knew it could do that because when we forked the coin, there was close to like 60 to 70 petahash out there that had just essentially got shut off, right? And put into closets somewhere. And it was mostly all over in Asia. And so when the coin started taking off again, China miner shows up and says, hey, I've got a couple thousand of these things I can fire up really quickly and get this thing off the ground and take some money out of it. And they did, and they did. They definitely did. So the real big kids showed up. And that just showed that there are two levels of really very uncomfortable, challenging hash rate dominance on our coin. One has been holding the coin price down forever. And then the minute the coin price did start to get a rise up, the other one showed up and said, we'll take it from here. And then they took over the chain for the period that there was money to be milked out of it. And then ultimately they've all left again. And now we're back to the, people that we know who are running the coin, and it is what it is. Well, that's all going to end this year. We're coming year. We're going to fork them off in 6 months and let the chips fall where they may. And I think ultimately for the benefit of the project. I think once that happens, by the way, and then the new miners that come in that can buy on a democratic basis and spread the hash rate around and so forth, ultimately will recognize, well, geez, there's only 1.5 million coins left to mine over the next year. What, how's this all going to work? It seems like the price isn't right. And I think you're going to see that we will end up being one of the coins that moves up fastest, which will negate some of the effect of that large amount of coins that are being given out to the network over the next 3 to 6 months. Um, the coin price, by the way, did reach in this year an all-time high of $3.32. And it's dropped back down to this year's low, which is around 11 cents. 11 cents is a really interesting number, by the way, because 11 cents is where we started, right? It's really weird because I remember back in the day, there were some China miners back when we first forked the coin, and they would sell over the counter because we didn't have an exchange yet in those first 6 months. And their over the counter sales started out at 11 cents. And then the first time we got onto an exchange, that's what it was selling for, was 11 cents. There was really nothing um, to drive it one way or the other. I equate this to something like Filecoin, by the way. If you look at Filecoin ran up to some crazy number. I mean, it was high. It was a couple $100 or something like that. And the deal is that their emission is only something like 10 or 12 or 15% of done or something like that. Some crazy number, right? They still have, you know, a ton of coins to still shed off on the blockchain for the next several years. So we call that fully diluted value when we value something towards the end of its emission versus valuing it at the beginning. Well, at the beginning, people were valuing our project at a lot more money because they were saying 11 cents back at the very beginning. So 11 cents fully diluted would have been worth a lot more back then than it's worth today when we are, almost fully diluted. So um, because you're essentially gambling right there that 11 cents is the starting point, right? Not the end game. And here we are fully diluted and we're still 11 cents. But look what's happened over that period of time. And specifically, let's look at some of the development milestones that happened this year. So we developed an idea, vision, understanding of this thing called the relayer. And this thing finally came to market this year. This thing finally showed up in a working variant this year. And it is a very complex and a very significant piece of IP. It is, I'm not even kidding right now. This thing, if you really understand how the relayer works, it is a significant piece of invention and innovation. And ultimately, nobody really knows about that yet. And nobody really understands that. When we move to a Web3 platform profile, people are going to get this idea that this relayer thing exists, and we've had it now, and it'll be operational for a year or two by the time we go to Web3. And all this stuff is going to turn out really to have a lot of people say, where were you all this time? Right? Because this IP is significant. It launched this year. It didn't launch perfectly, by the way. In the beginning of the year, and when we got through to NAB, the launch didn't go exactly the way we wanted, and we did run into some issues along the way. But ultimately, it's working pretty well now, and we did get it off the ground. The other thing that happened was a lot of our networking stuff blew up in December. But one of the things that happened was a time bomb got planted with all of these new providers showing up on the network. And what happened in the spring and summer was our network blew up. It got a little helping hand from one of our developers, but it wasn't really his blame. There's no blame there on that. What ended up happening was he exposed a weakness that was coming one way or the other. And that weakness did come. And essentially contracts failed left and right. And our network blew up. And it was bad. And ultimately, what we ended up having to do was we had to redesign the back end. And we went and we designed a clustered environment. And not only did we do a clustered environment, but on our contractor, we actually rewrote most of the code that we got from the contractor. I think one of our, core developers looked at it and said, this is hackathon code. We've had to essentially throw it all out and start over and, build it up from scratch. So we've got this big contractor that's now clustered. And then we've added another tool, a clustered Kafka database tool on the back end. And what there, like if you go out and do a Google search for Kafka and how it works for streaming this big giant amounts of data, you're going to find some people that say, there's only probably about 2% of the people that use Kafka that actually need it. We're one of them. We are one of the few examples that really need a Kafka cluster running underneath our thing, because when we get up to 40,000, 400,000, 4 million providers, the kind of data streaming that's going to be going through that contractor is going to be insane. And so it's a really important development that we made mid-year, and it really bogged us down. I mean, it really took us a lot of, development energy and time to kind of get that done. But it's done. And now we have this contractor migration. We are still cleaning up, the stragglers. There's still, 65 here or there. But out of the whole community and the whole network and so forth, we have a really performant, end-to-end contractor, customer, provider sort of environment that truly does work and services that relayer. The other thing that we did at the same time was we recognized that we needed to change over our CI/CD process on the back end, because it really was just very manual. We brought in an outside contractor who helped us out. Didn't really work. We ended up kind of like saying, okay, thanks for your service. We'll talk to you later. And then we brought in another guy who actually really did understand it. And he kind of got us set up correctly in terms of a Kubernetes backend and really getting that scripting going. And now we're in the process of finalizing the automation so that we can do the things we really need to do from an agile standpoint. We can put out nightly builds. We can do release candidates very easily and release them to a smaller group or to the full group or whatever we want to do there. So that whole process is now ready for working at scale. At the same time, we had to do, I think y'all remember how bad Grafana sucked for a whole period of time. That whole thing collapsed, and we ended up having to go through setting up a dev instance there. We had to harden our current, Grafana setup. I think we moved it to more robust servers along the way. So Grafana hasn't been an issue for the last several months, if you kind of think back about how things are going. So we had to do that whole thing and deliver that. And so the telemetrics has recently just had time to start doing some of those projects that we've been wanting to work on. And one was GeoIP location. Now it's not perfect. I'm still hearing from people saying, geez, I'm a little, 30 miles away from where I'm supposed to be. But it's not the way it used to be, where, somebody would show up in France when they were actually in Dallas, Texas. So, I think we're really making a lot of progress there, and that telemetrics and the Grafana upgrades this year have been substantial. We signed a deal with an integrator to do all of our XM builds going out the door. Now, I'm going to tell you about an exception to that here in a minute, but that turned out to be a really winning situation, because they can scale up and down. They can hold a lot of inventory for us here in the United States, and they could ultimately get us to a next place. We did bring on some outside manufacturing partners, but unfortunately, the collapse of the market really hurt them badly, because at the end of the day, they just didn't have the scope and scale to really do all that much. They are in place though right now. And so when we do move forward and start getting back into the growth posture, I believe we'll end up starting very cleanly with 3 manufacturing entities moving forward. But signing the integrator was the first big step, and it's really been a positive experience for us, and we've done really well. Another thing that we delivered this year was so when we started this thing back in 2018, there were essentially 5 people, if I remember correctly. Let me see if I got this right. I may miss somebody here, and if I do, I apologize. But in the beginning, it was Jay, myself, a guy named Boomer. He really was called Comedic Limey back then. I don't know what that actually meant, but that was his name. We had another guy named Drexel, who was here, and we had another guy named Starbucks 8. If you know Drexel or Starbucks 8, you are truly an OG. Otherwise, you've never heard of them. You've probably never seen them. They are still in the Discord. Well, Drexel, I think, has moved. No, he's back. And then Starbucks 8 is here, but he's never said a word to anybody for 3 fucking years. So I don't know what he's doing, where he's at, what his deal is. But those were our devs. And the one dev, Comedic Limey, or Boomer, as he's now called, did a lot of the early work on the fork. He did a lot of the early work on the airdrop. He did a lot of the early work on SPFs. and things that go like that. And then he had to go back to his day job and really focus there. And that's when we picked up, our new Golangers, Boris and Pavel and Alex, and then later Renat. But in those early days, Boomer was the guy who's a Java dev, and he came back into the project and decided he wanted to tackle a wallet. And so he put out this web wallet, and it's turned out to be pretty good, right? It works really well. So we delivered the web wallet, and then we iterated on it several times. And he's now working on a new iteration, which is going to pick up all of these new SPFs that are going to be delivered into the world. And ultimately, I felt so good about using it that I took the UI down off the website. You can no longer find the old Saya UI, which was a bunch of spaghetti code that sucked in almost every way imaginable. That's no longer there. Yeah, it makes it a little harder to stand up a host from scratch. You typically need and should do it in the CLI, but at the end of the day, the web wallet is the wallet going forward, and we're going to continue to keep iterating on that and moving that forward down the road. The other things that we came up with from a software development milestones is we got the Examiner full software releases out there, true to our promise. Every other project in this passive space typically threw out people on their own builds and just sold their own manufactured units. Again, we submitted to the will of the community and grandfathered in and said, look, we'll allow this to happen, and we'll even support it and build it out. And we put together these software licensing models so that you could actually DIY your own units. And I don't see that changing going forward. I think we're going to leave that in there, and we'll support it. It's going to be harder for us, but at the end of the day, I think it's a good thing to do. And I think ultimately it'll be there. But as I've said, you will want to be on the full license ultimately. And that means that sometime over the next, I don't know, give or take 6 to 12 months, there are probably 1,000 DIY basic license users who will get all their money back because they got 100% rebates on those units, and they're going to have to come to a decision point. And my gut is that we're going to lose a pretty good chunk of those people. My guess is we'll probably drop some 50% of them, maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. We'll see. I like making those kinds of bets and guesses. I'm going to say 50% is the over under at this point. But at that point, I think the other thing that will happen is that the examiners will begin to get back into that real significant growth posture, because what's going to end up happening is we will move forward in terms of selling storage on the network and get more customers coming forward. So the full installers for both Win and Linux are out there. We did release finally a migration tool for Windows. It needs to be released on a bug patch here that I think will ultimately turn it into a really good working piece of software. And then Sparky and another guy in our project are working on getting out a Docker native guide for the Synology and QNAP people. So that's ready to go. And ultimately, we delivered that. So it's been a supercharged year of development releases. We've done so much this year, and I'm so proud of the team because it's just been a crazy hard year to be in this thing, to be in crypto in general, to be even a living human, because essentially nothing seems to be what it looks like. Up is down. Every message is just, and the conflict is so high across the board. It's just been such a challenging time to be a human. And I think the team has just kind of like ignored it and shut it all out and said, you know what, we're just going to keep delivering. We're just going to keep delivering. And they have in spades. And it's just been a joy to watch and work with. And now we're under an awful lot of stress because the wrap, or the final take on all of that market collapse. And by the way, we all know it wasn't done right after we got past everybody who could go bankrupt going bankrupt. Once the 3AC guys went down the drain, I think a lot of us said, okay, well, I mean, that's got to be it, right? I mean, 12 weeks of solid down. I mean, come on, how can it go any further than that? And then the fucking kid in the Bahamas pops up and says, oh, by the way, it's all a big fucking scam. Nobody knew that was coming, and then it did, and there we are. And now we're in this place right now where the whole world looks like, crypto's never going to go anywhere, and it sucks, and law enforcement's going to come in and tear everybody apart. And blah, 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 blah. Well, to be frank about it, even though it was hard to kind of see it while it was happening, it does feel just like 2018 again. In hindsight, I don't know how I didn't see it because it does feel exactly like 2018. And what I said to myself in 2018, by the way, and what you're going to say to yourself right now is, well, at least now I'll know which mistakes not to make next time around. And I don't know how to explain it, but you probably won't. You probably will make the same mistakes or better mistakes differently. I know that's what happened with us, and it just is kind of what it is. So we're really tight right now with finances, and our situation is that we're trying to do some things. Let me finish up on a couple of things, other things that we did this year that I think are pretty important, and then I'll talk a little bit about those finances, and then I'll move a little bit to 2023 and talk about what's coming and how I think it's all going to play out. So another thing that we did over the course of this time was we've been uploading 1.9 terabytes of storage to the network. Really a lot more than that, by the way, because what happened was when the contractor failed, a lot of data that we had already uploaded to the network got blown away. So we've kind of uploaded probably well over 2 petabytes when it's all said and done, which means somebody probably actually won that community contest already, but because the contractor blew up, you probably got cheated out of your victory prize. And I don't even know if that contest is still running because we're so close, but we're so far, right? I mean, who knows when we're going to hit that 2 petabyte magic number. But one of the ways that that number has actually been going up is we brought Henrik on board, and Henrik has been working to drive a lot of relayer testing and to get that data onto the network and really understand how relayers work. And I think one of the things that you're going to see very shortly from us is something I'll talk about here in a minute, has to do with how relayers are provisioned to people. A relayer is actually a pretty simple thing to stand up, but it's such a complex piece of machinery that nobody really stands it up correctly on their first go around. And there's all kinds of ways you can make this thing far more performant than it just is in your first stand up. So Henrik's really helped us to identify a lot of that, what it takes to do, with 32 gigs of memory, with 16 gigs of memory, with 64 gigs, with however many cores you throw at it, however many processors you throw at it. And ultimately, there's some calculations in terms of the number of providers that you select, or in terms of the number of workers you use behind the scenes in order to access and to do this encoding and sharding and encrypting that needs to be done. So adding that testing regimen in there and having it kind of be running this whole period of time has been enormously helpful, and Henrik's been really valuable to us. He's mentioned an interest in coming aboard, on a paid full-time basis. And as of right now, I couldn't do anything, or I can't do anything for him because I don't have any money, right? I just do not have the money to pay him. I need to bring him aboard as a full, part of this thing because we need to keep that testing and we need to keep that QA and that work grinding out. So I'm focused on that as one of these new hires that I need to bring aboard as soon as I'm able to find the funding that I'm looking for. Another one that we did was we ended up bringing aboard some support people to help us with this big kind of crash of people joining the network. And we were really fortunate to find a couple, three folks that decided they wanted to take this. So Flux and Tony had been around the community for a while, and both of them had a lot of good sort of understanding. They both have kind of wildly divergent personality types, but I think it kind of fits. It's like you kind of get the support rep that you sort of need. And so they've been helping us, man around the clock for the whole year. And I think it's just made all the difference in terms of bringing it together. So we're really thankful to have them. And they've been doing just a great whale of a job. And then we were able to find another individual in Mark Grayson. And, Sparky is, as you know him, and he's not the guy who's not Sparky, or the other guy who I had to force change his name. Definitely not Sparky, or whatever the guy's name is. But Sparky's actually just been this amazing force in the project. I mean, he's just come in here and just kind of like, just, I don't know when he sleeps. He just doesn't sleep. And I don't understand how it works, but He just has just kind of just grinded and grinded and grinded and kept this network alive and kept the network going. And guess what? I'm not paying him. I mean, I am paying him. I'm paying him actually in equity in the corporation, and I'm paying him in some of our tokens and so forth. But again, I don't have the financial wherewithal right now to pay the people that I actually even have on the team, let alone bring on the people that I need. And I know that that's untenable long term. I know that it's not going to continue to go forward much longer. I've got to get this resolved. But I got to tell you, if that guy had not shown up when he had shown up, the project probably doesn't exist right now in the way, in the way it is. We probably are back to maybe 300 or 400 providers and a whole bunch of people who definitely have, thrown their Exa miners into a closet somewhere and have said, well, yeah, this was a scam and whatever and blah, blah, blah. So really, really crazy pleased to have had that scenario show up this year and essentially help us to get to that thing. And then the last person I want to mention, and I am leaving out some of our developers and so forth, and I have mentioned them in the call. I think ultimately I am paying them homage by the way of talking about the relayer, talking about host.io, and talking about the architecture that they put together, because that is them. That is the core developers that we have behind who I mentioned earlier. But the other individual who came aboard, I never really understood why I hired this guy, by the way. Back in the day when I started out on Saya, I started mining, I think in like June or July of 2017. And I mined like a lot of people. I was mining Ethereum, and Saya was this thing you could mine as a separate thing on the software GPU front. And essentially, so then I got a little into the Saya community. And one guy that was always there, sort of chatting everybody up and educating and talking to people and being involved, was Master HW. In fact, he's one of the few people, if I look at a profile, who has an older join date than me, right? Which bothers me, by the way, a little bit. But at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't spin the clock back. So, but I never really understood exactly, where he would fit in here. He had been in college for the last several years, and he finally graduated on a computer engineering degree, and said he expressed interest in coming back and being part. In the early days, he was a community manager, and just that fit for what he was doing. But I just realized that there was going to be a definite role and a reason for him to be here. And we ultimately formalized that this year as a technical marketing role. And he's done a great job of it. And one of the things I want to make sure that you're all aware of, because if you aren't, you're really missing out, is that he's been writing a whole bunch of articles about what the project is and what it does and how it works. And those articles live on all three of the websites that we have. And if you don't know that we have three websites, I'm really kind of ashamed. But at the end of the day, it's scpri.me, it's examiner.net, and it's xns.tech. And all three websites has an articles section. The two previous ones have articles right up at the top that you can go down and look at, and they will have really good information about the project and the coins and the architecture and how it all works. And then under the xns.tech website, under the resources section, is where we have all of this information about how the whole network is going to work for a real customer base and, selling storage to real business customers. And so that whole thing is getting fleshed out, and it's going to continue to get fleshed out over the coming year, and it's going to be this real hallmark. And one of the things that we came to that some of you are now participating in is this thing we're calling SC Prime or SCP University. And SCP University is interesting because, as things usually do, it got started out of my frustration, right? There were two specific people in the project. They're both still here, by the way. You don't see them very much because they're kind of like, I don't want to say they're on a shit list, but they're not, they're just guys, right? They're just people that are here that have been here for a long time. But what happened was, after about 3 years, I had conversations with both of them, and it was crazy because in the middle of the conversation, I realized, you've been here for 3 fucking years and you don't even know what the heck we built. You don't know what we're building. You don't understand how it works. How is that a thing? Right? And so I took both of them aside and I ran them through something I called SCP University, which was just essentially me pontificating for an hour, like I'm doing with you right now. And the deal is that they went away graduating or matriculating from SCP University. Well, the new version is a little bit better than that. It's a little bit more touchy-feely, it's a little bit more educational, it's a little bit less, anger and angst in it. It's more about teaching and guiding and taking us forward, and Henry does a great job of that. And ultimately, right now, we're going to get these first 2 sessions out of the way, or first 2, groups of sessions out of the way, where we ultimately are able to spin that into a video thing that anybody can go and watch and matriculate through. We'll add some questions and testing and homework and stuff behind that. And ultimately, what we're doing is we're starting to plant our feet for the thing that we know we need to do in the coming year, right? If you go to AWS, one of the things that happened with AWS as one of the early goings, and everybody's done it now behind them. Wasabi's done it, Google's done it, everybody's done it. They all have their own certifications, right? And the certifications are, this has been a thing in the industry forever, right? I mean, back in the day, Microsoft, I was on MCSE back in the 90s, for instance. Yeah, I'm that old. The deal is that they would provide these certification tracks so that you learn how their apps and architecture all work correctly. And by driving people through these certifications, they create a legion of evangelists essentially that can go out there and teach and guide and sell for them, right? Going forward. So if you go to AWS, cloud, professional is a thing. And there's all sorts of levels of that as you move up through their stack. And that's the thing that we're building right now. That's what Henry's putting together. He's starting the groundwork right now for what will be a cloud services professional certification on the XNS website going forward. And that will be one of the ways that we educate and grow partners who can go out there and sell the network in a way that we need to do it going forward. Because partner selling will probably be the lion's share of the sales that we make going out the door. So that's all underway, and he's doing a well of a job in terms of that whole technical marketing stuff. And again, it's one of those things where I need to try and do everything I can to sort of hold it together. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of take a little interstitial, and then I'm going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes talking about the future. And the interstitial is simply this. I've posted in the Consensus Mining channel a dark and doomy sort of scenario of where this thing might go. But even the dark doom doesn't scare me anymore like the dark doom scared me in 2019 or 2020. Back then, we had no idea how any of it was going to go. We didn't know, right? We didn't know. But now I'm really comfortable that what we've built is going to succeed and survive. And I'm really comfortable that we will get it off the ground. We have to make a couple of changes, and we're in the process of doing that right now. But more than anything, we have to get funded because right now we're broke. And what we're doing is we're essentially, offering really cool specials and really good early adopter type things, which I'm happy to do. And I'm glad you guys are taking advantage of it and having the ability to get it. But at the end of the day, we're having to do a lot to get this stuff out the door. And just like last December, I'm actually down in the basement, full time now, building out these refurbs, for instance, because that's another way we're bringing in extra money into the project to keep this salary wheel turning and keep people that we have on board and hopefully point to the next place. What happened is we went through a process of starting to talk to venture capitalists, and the calls were great. There are places where I will sing my own praises, right? There are a few places where I'm happy to stand up and say I'm pretty good at this. And the one place where I'm pretty good is representing this project. And in those calls, they all went really well. But it was clear that we weren't quite ready, right? We didn't have any really good projections on how many, terabytes or petabytes or exabytes we're going to be able to sell. But I don't even think that mattered. I don't think it would have mattered if we had good, solid pro formas and ultimately, could say, well, quarter two is going to look like this. Because ultimately, with the market melting down in crypto the way it has, it also melted down in the real markets. And so VCs were not in the mode of signing up
a whole bunch of term sheets. But what I'm reading and what I'm seeing out there in a lot of the places where this, sort of happens is that money's not gone. Those VCs still have the funds. Those LPs are still involved and they want yield, right? So, like A16Z, they still have a shed load of money in their treasury that they want to give away. They're on pause right now a little bit, just like everybody is, because nobody knows what's going to happen from SBF and the prosecutions that are going to go on up there. Nobody knows if the law is going to swoop in on Binance and so forth. So at the end of the day, that VC money is still there, and we're going to be ready to take it when it comes back in full force. What I'm doing right now in the interim, in order to sort of buttress that, is aside from the front end of doing the sales, the discounted sales and all that sort of stuff, and then the back end of looking at VCs, I've made available another about 10% of our available issued shares or available to issue shares of stock in another angel round. And so I've been telling people that there is angel investment available down to as low as $25,000. I can't get into it beyond much there, because if I do, then I'm actually advertising a sale of a security to you, and I'm not doing that. If you are an accredited investor, or an accredited investor who might want to be part of this thing, essentially accredited investors are somebody who has more than, I believe it's 1 million, it might be 2 million now in overall assets, not counting your house. Or it's 1 million, and then $200,000 or $200,000 a year in salary. Well, geez, with the way inflation's been lately, I'm guessing there's a lot more accredited people out there than there used to be, but that's what it takes to be an angel in the project. And if you are that, or you know somebody who is that, and you think this is a good opportunity, it's as little as 25,000 to enter in, and they can talk to me, and I will give them the real pitch and tell them what it means and what's involved, and how it all works. The goal is to sell up to 1 million shares of stock in that angel round and fund the company to at least a middle zone. It won't get me where I need to be, but it will hopefully allow me to bring on the 2 or 3 people that are hanging out there right now that need to get signed up and put on a pay for basis. So that is really sort of the big push for me right now behind the scenes, and where I'm focused mostly in terms of trying to raise money. So that's a thing. And that's kind of where we're at. Right now, our runway is so for the longest time, I used to be able to say, well, our runway is 90 days, and it just keeps staying 90 days. And when the market all collapsed, the runway dropped to 45 days and then got down to even 30 days. And at one point, I didn't even know where the next pay period was going to come from. Well, we're now back to about 45 days of runway. So it's still really, nip and tuck and scary and all that sort of shit. But look, this is what happens if it all falls off the table. Yeah, I'm going to have some really tough conversations with a really great group of people, really great group of people, probably some of the best developers that exist in this space. Now, I'm not saying they're all the best coders on the planet. I'm sure there are better coders out there than our coders, but I don't know. I mean, I'd have to say we've assembled a pretty strong team. They've developed and released a pretty good product. So I don't, I would put them up against anybody at this point, and it's going to be really hard if I have to do this next step. And the next step would be mothballing the project. We don't have any debt, right? We just don't have any debt. We just didn't take that on. We didn't do that thing. And maybe you can fault me for that right now, because if I had taken on a whole bunch of debt when debt was free and easy, we'd have some money right now, but we'd probably be paying a pretty high interest rate, and we'd also be scared right now to be going bankrupt, and because we'd have all this debt, and we just don't. The only debt we have is the rebate liability on the SCP coins, and we've got enough to cover them. After the fork, we'll have more than enough to cover them. People are claiming that we did this fork just only, so that we didn't have to pay out these SCPs. At the end of the day, I'm not pushing anybody to take that deal. If you want SPFs, you should take the deal. If you don't want SPFs, don't take the fucking deal. I don't care. I'm not pumping you on anything. This is a token that we needed to build. so that we could go head to head against Filecoin and Storage and be in that mode like Helium got when they went from 4,000 to 4 million or 1 million or whatever it is that they did. That's what it's going to take for us to get there. That's what we're forking for, not for this liability that's out there. That liability will get taken care of. And, if it doesn't get taken care of on SCP coins because you all decide to sell the coin down, I know you're not selling it down. The miners decide to sell it down to 2 cents or 4 cents or whatever, then we'll just do something else. We'll give people extra licenses. We'll find a way to give them miners, additional miners. We'll figure out a way to take care of that liability because that's something that we've always done and we always will. But the people who will end up taking it on the chin are my developers, and I'll have to lay them all off. And ultimately, I will mothball the project. I will probably keep one or two people around beside me and continue to pay them. I will stop paying myself. The only thing I will continue to pay myself is my own health insurance. And then essentially, I'll go right back to the posture that I was in for the first 2 years of the project, just evangelizing people and getting people kind of pumped up and so forth, and we'll move forward. And if you hate on me for any of the stuff that I'm saying right now, I'm not going to, take issue with it. You can do whatever you want to do and feel however you want to feel about me. But what you can't do is you can't say that the team that surrounds me hasn't given their guts for this thing, because they have. And they aren't working. When Saya went up in fucking flames, Skynet went poof. And part of the reason it went poof was because he was paying all of his guys $250,000 a year. And I'm not saying that his guys weren't worth $250,000 a year, but our guys don't make anywhere near that. They don't make anywhere near that. They're all here because they believe in the outcome, right? They believe where it's going to go. So I don't know. It could turn out that I end up mothballing the thing and they all say, well, we're not giving up. We're going to keep going. I don't know. And I sure as fuck don't want to have to ask him that. I don't even want that conversation to happen. So at the end of the day, it's something that can happen though. If we have to mothball and go into hiatus for 12 to 18 months, then that's what we'll do. And when the markets turn and everything starts coming back, then I'll welcome everybody back and we'll, try and take it from there. And some people come back and some won't, and it'll be what it'll be. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. I think I'm going to go ahead and get the angel money that I'm looking for. I think I'm going to turn that into a spin into the VC money in the first to second to third quarter of next year, depending on how things look. And I think that one thing that actually is going to happen next, and now I'm going to get back to the positive, optimistic stuff again, is that 2023 is going to turn out to be a watershed year for us. Because I think what's going to happen looks like this. So one of the things that has happened already, and I didn't actually see it happening. I did, but I had so many things going on that I didn't really see it for what it was. We've had about 10 or 11 trial users show up, and they've shown up and then they've left. And we haven't really had an inquest with them. We haven't had a really good understanding of, well, why did they show up and then why did they leave? Right. And because we've been so busy with all of the stuff that we did this year, right? We didn't have the resources to be able to do that. But now that we've kind of really clearly seen it, we're now in that place right now where we're devising a new tool set, and we're going to call it the Relayer Wizard, right? Because what needs to happen is everybody that runs a relay needs to be run through this wizard, right? They need to go through this process of understanding, well, what is it you're trying to do? What do you want to get to? What kind of resources are you going to bring to it? What kind of ability do you have to actually stand this up on your own? How much help do you need? How many resources can you throw at it? Do you need to buy a piece of equipment for it? Are you going to stand up a beam? Then once you get all that kind of figured out, then you got to figure out, well, what kind of files are you going to be uploading and how many and how much? Are they big files like video? Are they going to be heavily accessed a lot? Are they small files like JPEGs and you're going to need to be accessing them every single day? Are they just, archive files that are going to go up through VM and ultimately, live up there and hardly ever come down? Is it just document archives that need to go up and have solid immutability so you can legally say that they're ransomware proof and can't be altered? We can do all of that stuff, but you have to ask you first if that's what you're doing, because if that's what you're doing, We have to tweak the relayer for you. We have to set up the env file for you differently. We have to set up how it talks to the network differently. We have to configure it, because if you just stand it up, you may get close to what your need is, but you're not going to get perfect. And we can get you perfect, right? And that's the thing. And once you see our network running perfectly, oh, amazing. It is amazing. And so that's the piece that's kind of been missing. And in that process of actually doing that work with the customer, we're establishing that relationship with them and handholding them. And then we can do some things like subsidize their work for a period of time and so forth. And ultimately, we can ensure that they have success and turn them into winning customers that then go out and tell their friends about us. And then the cycle continues to move forward. So that relayer wizard has really been a missing piece of this puzzle. And we're working on it right now. We expect to have it released here very shortly, and we'll start running people through it. And we'll get this first couple of test customers, early evangelists, early adopters, whatever you want to call them, in through the transom. There are some people that believe the coin price isn't where it is because we don't have customers on the network. They're just fucking wrong. It's stupid to think that. And if you think that, I'm not going to argue with you anymore on it. You're just wrong, and I'm just right. But you're not totally wrong. And the reason why you're not totally wrong is because of the interrelated nature of this whole thing. What ends up happening is, if we go out and we find a customer to upload, let's say, a significant amount of data, 400 or 500 terabytes of data on the network. Well, what happens there is that 400 or 500 terabytes will start getting uploaded. People will get enthusiastic because they'll see the number going up into the right on their miners. They'll be happy. They'll stick around. They'll maybe throw down for a full license where maybe they weren't sure they were going to throw down for a full license. Maybe they buy another examiner. Maybe they get some friends to come in and they buy examiners. And suddenly we have some more money in our treasury, right? And as we have more money in our treasury and we have 400 terabytes going up onto the network, now we've got to go out and we've got to buy a few more SCPs. Probably we already have some SCPs in our treasury and we don't need to. But remember, the coin is at an all-time low again, right? It's back at that place where it's really derisory valued, right? So now is when we should be buying it, right? Now is when, if we had a bunch of extra money, we would be putting as much as we could into it because we know where it's going to head and where it's going to go. So ultimately, then as we start to put a little bit more money back into the coin, we get a little more liquidity. That gets more volume on the exchanges. As we get more volume on the exchanges, that allows us to have the kind of conversations with Wabi or with KuCoin or one of those, just below top tier at this point. And then ultimately we'll land one of those. And then that helps us take the next step. And then is when the coin price begins to take its big leap forward and start up the path. So it's not a straight line saying get money, get people on the network, and all of a sudden the coin price goes up. It doesn't work that way. What happens is the ecosystem improves. And as the ecosystem improves, then we ultimately are able to move things forward to where the coin price begins to improve and everything in the network improves. We get more growth. It's like a flywheel, for lack of a better word, and ultimately it begins to develop. This wizard, I expect to have really starting active basically next week. The next thing I want to talk about is this fork and what's going to happen there with the SPFs and so forth. And then I think we will take some questions if you have some. Didn't really intend to, but it is what it is. We'll do that if you want. So right now we've gone through and we've done the fork code development. We've actually got set up now and are ready to begin doing test netting on a fork. You always want to do test nets on forks because you're literally building something that can break the whole thing. So that will begin next week. And essentially we'll run through several days of test netting, which is just running a mirror copy of our network in some ways, verifying that the SPFs print out correctly, that they gain the tax off the network that they're supposed to get, and that it's spread out, and that the payouts are done properly, that we don't break contracting, that everything works out good. And then what will happen is once test netting is good and we've got a seal of approval on the test netting, then the next thing we'll do is we'll roll out a new copy of the daemon to the world. That's SPD for if you don't know what the daemon is. So 168 or 170, I don't know what the number is going to be yet. We'll have to discuss that. And then as the daemon goes out there, then you'll have to update that part of your puzzle. So if you have a full licensed instance, you may or may not get another version of the full software release, but you will definitely have to update the daemon. I think you will get a full software release because ultimately this will probably be the version that will have the SPFs clearly showing inside the wallet presentation and the ability to send and receive them and connect them in, as a contract and so forth. So that software will come out likely towards the end of next week. And as we release that software, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You have to upgrade. So you need to be aware that over the next 3 weeks, you have a software upgrade ahead of you. And if you don't do this software upgrade, you risk losing everything in terms of your contracts and all of your currently stored data and everything. Because the minute the fork goes off, you're on a different chain. And if you're on a different chain, you are no longer collecting off the contract with us. You're collecting off of somebody else. Well, there is nobody else. So guess what? You lose. So plan to do an upgrade over the next 3 weeks. By the end of next week, we'll have very clear instructions on how everybody does that. And once again, if you own an Examiner, you don't have to actually even care because guess what? Examiners update automatically. And that's one of the benefits of having an Examiner. So that's the story. We're sticking to it. Now, the SPFBs that are coming out, we did increase the population from 200 million to 400 million. It's the right time to do it now because it sets us up. As I said with Filecoin, they still have probably 70% of their emission to come. You know, people don't understand this. On the Filecoin network, it's all test data because it's all paid for by the company. It's free. All the data on the Filecoin network is free, right? And it's all free because they have this giant emission and this giant wallet that they can go ahead and spend. And that thing goes for years, right? They can keep doing that now for the next 3 or 4 years. They don't care that they don't have an S3 client. They don't care that they don't have real business customers. They're out there trying to onboard people like Wikipedia, right? Or the Internet Archive or people like that, because all they want is just some activity that they can use to give their coin out to their miners, right? That are mining on their consensus, which is proof of capacity. And ultimately, they can do that for years and they will do it for years. They don't care right now whether they have an actual product or not. They don't care. Storage is a little different. Storage does care because they need to make that money. They need to get out there and sell the products to real people. But same thing. They own half of their supply. They own 250 million storage tokens, and there are only 470 or 480 million in the entire supply. That's crazy. We don't have anything like that right now, right? So that's what the SPFs are all about. That is the purpose of the SPF, so that we have that incentive architecture in place so that we can grow the network out over the next 3, 4, 5 years, all the way up to millions of nodes as we go forward. And that's what the SPFs will deliver for us. They will come to fruition likely the second week. I think we said, look at the calendar real quickly. I said in the announcements when it is, but I think it's the week of the 9th that release will ultimately take place. The fork will happen, and ultimately that will go forward. As I said, with consensus, we put that off for 180 days, so that won't happen until June or July or whenever that will happen. And it might not even happen, by the way. It might not have to. If Maine comes to the table with a miner, who knows? We may not even need to do that. All right, well, there you go. Kind of a nice tight wrap up of everything. It's been a hell of a year. We've accomplished so much. I'm so proud of everybody. I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud that you're still here. And I'm proud that you're sticking with us. And I'm proud that you understand this and took the time to understand it. Because at the end of the day, I think you're going to be rewarded glamorously from all this stuff, because you're essentially here when the thing was still a dream and a pipe dream and a vision. And ultimately, as we start to onboard these customers now going forward and we start to bring on real data, you guys are going to be the guys, the pathfinders that teach everybody else that comes aboard. You guys are the ones that are going to guide the network as it goes forward. And just like the people laughed at you and said, ROI, I did that months ago, right? When you first signed up, you'll be saying those same things to those new people that show up. And and come down the road. So a lot to be very happy and proud about this year. Yeah, there's a little bit of fear factor built into there, but there always is. The chute will open when it's supposed to open, and we will get where we need to get to. So I will go ahead and see if any of you have some hands raised or not, and we'll take a question or two if you want. And then we will go ahead and let you go for holidays.
Why is the SPF rebate? Why is it an all or nothing situation? Why is it not? You can't say if you've got two already, you can't keep two of the rebates and then change two of the rebates to the SPFB.
Well, I described this in the channels pretty clearly, because it's only fair, right? We're letting you turn in rebate 1 and 2 when you got coins that were worth like $1.19 or more, some crazy number. And we're letting you turn those in, which you can then turn around and go rebuy at 11 cents a piece. But on the other side of that coin, we need it to be fair. We need to get the ones that are the big amounts, right? The R4, right? So I couldn't really come up with a fairer way to do it. So it is what it is.
All right, that's fair enough. So then the next question is, so when will the SPFBs start to turn it?
When the fork happens the week of the 9th. So after you do that software update, the fork will go off. If you've never been involved in a hard fork, it's exciting. It's probably like your first sexual experience. It's exciting and it's probably over too quick, but it'll be fun to watch that night when the fork goes off.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So as soon as it goes off, then I'll start churning, because I've got one contract which I'm fine with. It's working away in the background. So as soon as the fork goes through, then it'll start churning off straight away.
Yeah, but the thing about it is that we are going to be manually distributing a whole bunch of the SPFs, like a lot of these like buy 3 get 2x type things. A lot of those tokens are going to be distributed manually. Now the rebate coins, the ones that are, you remitted for, those will get sent out on an automatic basis to cover from super admin supervisor. So you will get a chunk right away. And then you'll get another chunk probably within a couple of days, depending on if you had some other bonus. The other thing is we've said we were going to do some things for people that purchased from the investor group. So those will be manually distributed as well.
Okay, cool. All right. Cheers, guys. Cheers.
Okay. Have a great holiday.
Okay. Quick question. Good summation, by the way. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much. The after the fork, will the token be SCP or will it be SPF? I'm just a little confused there.
There will always be a utility coin at the base of this permissionless network, and that coin will always be SCP. It won't always live on the blockchain that it's currently on, by the way. We already know that within about 2 to 3 years, we're going to need to do some coding to move it over to Ethereum or another blockchain like that. But it will still be SCP, and then it will still be the utility coin driving the network. It will be the coin that gets put into smart contracts. It will be the coin that's used as the coin of the realm. SPFs are a supercharger coin. What they do is they allow you to earn some percentage of the entire storage that comes into the network versus just the storage you're providing. So from that standpoint, they're a little different kind of a token, and they are a token. And at some point, we will list them on an exchange and so forth, but it won't be until we list SCP on a major exchange. So really, the whole notion of those are long-term token,
more about gaining extra value on the network and not as much about a speculative vehicle. You know, we just have never been that much into that thing, even though I always talk about coin price. But yes, SCP will always be here. SPFs are sort of that frosting token.
If SCP will still be the token, and well, I'm sure we're still under the same algorithm, what's stopping those crazy miners from manipulating the coin as they're doing now?
Well, I'm going to fork them off in about 6 months. No, actually, so I am actually going to fork them off in 6 months if circumstances don't change. If things stay the same as they are right now, those guys are history. And what'll end up happening, some of those guys, by the way, own the other kinds of miners that are out there. So, you know, it's not like they're going to go away totally. It's just a more democratic distribution of hash rate. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think that this new gold shell miner is going to discount down significantly. I think Bitmain's about to come out with a crazy high efficiency miner, and that's going to change the equation. And I think ultimately they're going to get forked off without a fork. I think their crappy S11 in a silicon miner is about to become made worthless anyway. So, and I know some of you people own S11s, but this thing started out as the reason why we ended up having a project, and now it's turned out to be this cancerous tumor that lives inside our project, and it's ultimately got to get excised one way or the other. Anyway, I don't think it's an issue.
Thank you, sir. Have a great holiday.
Yep, you too. Okay, looks like that's it. Look, I don't know if you celebrate Kwanzaa. I don't know if Krampus shows up at your house. That Bowen Yang Krampus thing was pretty good, actually. Not much of a Saturday Night Live 5 fan anymore, but that one was a good skit. I guess Krampus is Eastern Euros, so that's probably Rhinus that get visited by Krampus every year. Kwanzaa, you know, if you're celebrating the menorah and the nights and all of that stuff with the tribe, or if you're good old-fashioned Jesus worshippers, have a great holiday. Have a great Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, the whole 9 yards of it. I really love all you people, and I'm really glad to be associated with you. You're the epitome of professionalism, and you've built a hell of a network, and we're going to make you really proud of it. Thanks, everybody.